So the first thing I wanted to do with this program is, I was the only one to program anything for this concert. So in rehearsals, the guys are like, this is really hard. And I say, I'm sorry, but not sorry at the same time.
Heavy is the crown, dude.
I was going to say, you must be able to relate, Dani.
I knew.
Hi everyone, welcome to OSA Backstage. I'm Dani Meyer, this is Sauce, and on today's episode, Serena and I have an absolute blast talking with Principal French horn Brett Hodge. He is the curator behind the Omaha Chamber Music Society's opening summer concert series program, Apex Brass. So we talked to him about all things brass quintet, what those programs can be, what he chose. We talked to him about his favorite dinosaur. Yes, you might be surprised by the answer, or if you're a John Williams fan, you will not be surprised at all. We talked briefly about ASMR. Let's just say I cut the opening of the video because on a scale of 1 to eating pickle on mic, whispering into a microphone is so far off the scale, it's not even close to the scale. The scale is a dot to you. So I'm glad I took that out. But if you hear us reference that, that's what we're talking about. And we start to get to know Brett a little bit. We're looking forward to getting to know him better as the series continues. But he was a joy. This program's going to be a joy. I really hope you check it out. June 8th, 3 p.m., Apex Brass. For more info, go to omahachambermusic.org. And right now, enjoy the episode.
Fantastic. Uncomfortable is the name of the day. Hi, Brett.
Hi.
You came up uncomfortable. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you guys?
Excellent. Would you introduce yourself one more time for the people who almost turned this podcast?
Hi, everybody. My name is Brett Hodge, and I'm the principal horn of the Omaha Symphony.
Yay. We are one of these days going to drag you back in here to deep dive the symphony side of things, because you do have like a big solo coming up in October, and in general you have big solos almost every week. That's you picked it. That's not my fault. You picked French horn. You picked Principal French horn. You just happen to be good at it.
I didn't pick the horn. It was picked for me.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
What's your origin story?
Yeah, we're gonna.
So my parents were. My dad was a high school band director. My mom was an elementary music teacher. Started me on piano, and then they said I wanted to play percussion. And they're like, you already play piano. That's kind of like percussion. And I was like, oh, okay. And then one day they brought home a horn. And I said, what's this? They said, it's a French horn. Here you go. And here I am.
Wow. So it really was picked for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had their reasons. Like, I sang in children's choir. They're like, okay, you have a good ear. This is something you should really try. And I said, okay, I didn't fight it. I was like, oh, it looks cool. It has a lot of bends and it looks fun. And
was it fun? Is it fun? Maybe that's more appropriate.
Most days it is. It has its moments. We have a love-hate relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I know I just said we'll deep dive you later. I'm going to break that immediately.
Okay.
At what point did you become aware that French horn is one of the most exposed, difficult instruments in the orchestra? Were you aware of that? I'm sorry to bring that to your awareness if you weren't.
Not really. I mean, you grew up, you hear the Hollywood studio recordings from all the movies. Like, oh, that's really cool. You hear all the horns, John Williams, yay. And then, I started playing in youth orchestra, I grew up in St. Louis, so the St. Louis Symphony is my home. And I started going to their concerts and all that stuff. So it was kind of like this is a lot. This is really cool. I want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I did. I originally started as a music education major. And then I realized once I put a clarinet in my mouth that I really hated it. And that I just kept going with performance instead of education. And I also saw what my parents dealt with as educators, and I didn't want to deal with that.
Okay. All right. So it's almost like a classroom of children.
Yeah.
Bruckner 4.
Yeah.
Kind of, okay. All right. They balance each other out. That's really fun that you were essentially just given this instrument and then you just, I guess, kept turning back to it. Like, no, maybe it's a love-hate relationship, but you're the love-hate relationship I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's home.
Yeah, actually, I do get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
you know what your struggles are going to be.
there's a lot of comfort in that, isn't there?
A lot.
Trying anything new. That's maybe it's like.
Oh, I love new things.
Yeah.
It's just that I always know what my day-to-day should be.
Okay. And that's spending time with
my instrument, yeah.
Does your instrument have a name?
No. I don't do that.
We should add that question to the list. You don't do that?
No.
Do you know people who name their horns?
Yeah, probably. I just don't care to ask.
Speaking of asking. Okay, so we brought you in here to this room, to this ASMR negative space, primarily because you're kicking off the Omaha Chamber Music Society's 25th summer concert series with Apex Brass.
Yes.
And I have this theory, being married to a trombonist, that brass quintets are like the only chamber ensemble that can get away with playing both sides of the fence at all times, right? Like if you're looking for something zany and fun and ludicrous, a brass quintet is who's going to do the arrangement, and it's going to sound good. Like the Vitamin String Quartet can only do so much. They just can't. A string ensemble is just not gonna hit that. So a brass quintet's the one ensemble that can go on the zany side of the fence, which is why the Canadian brass exist. Yeah. Then you have the other side, which is some of the most difficult music ever conceived for 5 people who have to at some point breathe.
Or not.
Is that true of French horn music outside of brass quintet, or is that a uniquely brass quintet thing?
It's really interesting. The horn can be, I think it's probably the most versatile instrument in the entire scheme of orchestral music. We've got brass quintet, we've got wind quintet, we have a lot of horn and strings. Mm-hmm. So we play with everybody, a lot of horn and percussion. I'm sure you can find the same thing, but you don't really see like a flute in brass quintet. You don't see that combination. The voice is just so malleable. You can adapt to anything. And so I think that's a really amazing thing of what I get to do. I get to do everything. Of all the instruments on stage, you a lot of times see, we're the only ones sitting there through the Haydn, the Mozarts, mm-hmm. and then the new music, and then the big stuff, along with the strings, or sometimes like we've done on our last couple of Joslin series, no strings, just a small wind ensemble or quintet, octet, whatever it is.
Yeah. Do you think it's the range and the tone? Is that what lends itself most to being everywhere at once?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of the above. We can be a brass instrument. We can also be a woodwind instrument, and we can be our own voice too.
Okay, that's true. That's the number of songs that have been done by brass, done by French horn, are really lovely. Okay, but you chose and so the other thing I've learned over the years is that a brass quintet concert is seemingly either all arrangements to a degree because they're fun and they can be virtuosic. So it's almost like a night at the Pops, right?
Yeah.
Or they are all music written exclusively for quintet. And you went with that latter route. Is there a reason you chose that direction? Do you prefer that music, or do you just feel like this year this is what I wanted to do?
Yeah, it's a deep question. There's a lot of ways to get through this. So the first thing I wanted to do with this program is, I was the only one to program anything for this concert. So mm-hmm. in rehearsals, the guys are like, this is really hard. And I say, I'm sorry, but not sorry at the same time.
Heavy as the crown, dude.
I was going to say, you must be able to relate, Dani.
I knew what I was getting us into. Mm-hmm. And I said, I programmed this almost a year ago. So I said, hey, this is what we're going to do. If anybody has any qualms with this, tell me now. And nobody said anything. Mm-hmm. I said, cool, we're excited to do a brass quintet show. Just, that's it. Nothing else. It's all us. And so I said, okay, here we go. And whether they like it or not now, it's been fun actually diving into it and getting through these pieces. But my main goal in this, I had several themes that I wanted to try to convey. I don't think I got a single one perfectly. I was thinking, music from around the world. traditional versus new. And then I thought, how can I combine all of these things together to create not only something that's satisfying for us musicians to play, also for the audience to listen to, that includes new, that includes old, that includes a wide variety of representation of composers. And I think I met that goal here. Mm-hmm. And there are composers on there that are my friends. There are composers on there that my teachers knew and that worked with directly. There's people that I don't know. And in doing a lot of the research, I scoured hundreds of pieces. And I shied away from the arrangements because I feel as if in the kind of shift in the paradigm in programming now, that it was more important to focus on things that were written specifically for brass quintet and that were the variety that we wanted to represent in this program. So I shied away from that. Although I love the Empire Brass Class Brass album. My former teacher, Marty Happelman, was one of the horn players in Canadian Brass and Empire. So I got firsthand a lot of this, and I actually have some original arrangements from there because when he retired, I got his library. So I have a lot of music, like I think 16 filing cabinets full.
You sure do.
I do.
My husband helped you.
Yes, he did.
Put those in. Okay, so you're right. It's a difficult line to walk. I imagine one of the difficulties is not just what'll be fun for us to play and what will be satisfying for the audience, but what can we physically handle? Because I'm not sure what this is like necessarily for wind players. I think we've kind of gotten this answered. Strings, to a degree, I think we have a longer threshold of playing continuously than you guys probably do.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, this is it.
Yeah. So
how do you look at all the parts? Do you listen through and you kind of gauge like, okay, after this piece, we're going to need something XYZ to let Craig wind down or give our trumpets a break? How do you balance that out?
I tried to plan it accordingly. You have your light pieces and your heavy pieces. I tried to do it almost in two halves, if you will, because I knew there was going to be an intermission. And it's hard to balance it that way because you can have a short piece, like our opener is really heavy. And it's called Spanish Fanfare. And it was actually picked by our lovely Federico Montes. I was looking for something fanfare. He's like, oh, I know this composer. It's from Colombia, and I was looking for something. So I was like, try this. I said, oh, okay, great. So he sent me a YouTube link. Awesome. But it's like in your face first thing on the program. And then after that, I said, okay, we need to do something that maybe develops a little bit, give ourselves a break, do some talking. And that's something that I'm not a big fan of. But for this instance, I would like to do talking about it because this is something that I personally curated and was able to do on my own. And so I think it's nice to make that connection with an audience, but also not bore them to death. So a lot of personal stories and things like that, why I chose these pieces. Program notes can only go so far.
That's true. And I feel like talking is a brass quintet tradition because it gives everybody a second to set their faces and like breathe for a moment. Are you going to ask anybody else to talk on the program, or are you kind of carrying this yourself?
We're going to find out this week during rehearsals. I imagine a couple other people will say some things. Craig Fuller's he's a big talker. Mm-hmm. I should say he's very good at it. We've done some education shows, and he is great at getting up there with the students and saying, hey, this is how this works. Let's do that. And, we're going to miss him after he retires at the end of this season, but it'll be good for us to get a last kind of big bang in with him.
That is nice, isn't it? It's like you finish up the symphony season with him, and then he has one big brass quintet hurrah with you guys. And it's like he's saying goodbye to each organization that he worked with, one at a time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
I have just like a weird, fun question, but I went to a few Canadian Brass concerts, and they do a lot of choreography, which I think is also very brass quintet, like unique to brass quintet, besides maybe tuba, but he's very,
right.
He does all the hidings and stuff. But do you have thoughts about that? Have you ever done a concert like that? that's probably not going to be part of this concert, I'm guessing.
No,
but
it's not.
right, because it's not an arrangement of whatever fun, shtick that goes along with it. But
But they also do very serious music too, and I think that's part of it, is the balance. But I think nowadays, I say this very lightly, but the entertainment value is much less because people don't have the attention span for something like that anymore. And so I feel like in doing this, we would need a lot more rehearsal time. We're doing more concert setting music, especially for this audience, because that's what they come to hear on these series. They want to hear a concert. And maybe if it were advertised differently, or a different organization, a partnership, if it were an all kids concert, of course there would be so much more shtick. But because it's, paid subscribers, things like that coming to this, it's more of the concert value.
And we have heard, I remember getting that feedback before with brass quintet programs on the summer concert series. People would walk out and be like, oh, that wasn't what I was worried it was going to be. And I thought that was such a, and what they were always worried it was going to be some sort of like take me out to the ball game sort of deal. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those concerts are fun, but I think you're right. There's like a time and a place, and what are you actually being asked to do?
Right.
And if you have one chance all year to program a squarely music for brass quintet chamber concert, what are you going to spend your time on?
And it's what I call the concertized version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare? So I'm going to set aside the you. How would a normal person prepare for a program like this?
That's...
How long would it take, do you think?
I don't know. Everybody's different.
Okay.
I have my strengths. I have my weaknesses. But, as a group, we've been rehearsing a lot of these things since, I would say, March, just because we had some other events leading up to this. So we had to have half the program ready for an education concert, last month. So we worked that up, and we had some lighter pieces in there because we weren't going to do our full recital program for a group of middle school and high school kids who aren't going to have the attention span to sit through that. They wanted the demonstration. They wanted some of the shtick. So we were able to throw in some other pieces that we had done either prior together or just like a Gabrielli, something light. And they enjoyed that. But maybe I won't. We didn't want to do it on the concert. So we've had ample time, but also we've had symphony things. It's scheduling and layering things on top of each other. So, I started preparation for some of these pieces like way back in January.
Is it kind of like preparing for a big sports competition where that if you perform it in March, your endurance for performing it in April will be better, in May will be better, in June will be better? Is there any rhyme or reason to get it in your lungs and your body now so that you can gradually become more physically capable?
I think there's something to be said about knowing how something feels. And I'm one of those people where I like to know what a program feels like top to bottom, because I feel like that helps you actually emulate what the performance is going to be like. And so in doing some of these pieces and doing them in specific spots in the program, how things are going to actually feel here. Some people like that. Some people don't. Some people like just the kind of ambiguity of it, where they don't know what it's going to feel like, and then you just deal with it on the spot. Where, I don't know, I'm a fan of, nerves go away with preparation. And I'm not typically a nervous person, but it's also nice to know, like, hey, I'm going to feel like my face is going to feel really flat or really puffy after doing this. And then this is what I need to do in order to, I need to use more air on this, or just to make it the best possible performance.
That actually, okay, so take a right, say signal left and say right turn.
My right.
You're right. Okay. Can you walk us through some of the horrible, no good facial feelings that a brass player might deal with when you're preparing a program like this? Because I have this great memory of, I think I told you about this, like I think it was 2021, and we had brought the summer concert series back, but it was about 108 in Omaha, and the power had gone off in that midtown area, right, including the conservatory. So we had to move this wind quintet and piano program into the coffee shop, which had a piano and enough natural light to do it, right? And so they were total champions, and they played almost that entire program. But as they're waiting backstage before their final piece, they had planned this Ligeti encore. And Nick Nelson just turns to me and goes, "So we're not going to do the Ligeti because Garrett's horn refuses to stay on his face." And poor Garrett, he's sweating because it's 100 degrees inside the air conditioning. He's like, it won't stay on.
Yeah.
And so what are the things, not to make you think about all the bad things that could happen, but like you said, my face feels flat or my face feels puffy. Like, what does that actually mean?
For each instrument, I think it has a different feeling, just because like the horn, we have the smallest mouthpiece out of all of them. Our mouthpiece is deeper, but it's smaller than a trumpet mouthpiece. Theirs are a little bit more shallow. But for me, if my face feels puffy, that just means I haven't done maybe enough playing that day, or
so if it's puffy, that means it's hard to get into position.
It just it just seems like I need to focus a little bit more, maybe add a little bit more air, maybe didn't drink enough water, that type of thing.
We have margarita mix if you need to drink more water.
Electrolytes are fine.
All the electrolytes.
And if my face feels spread, to me, that in my language, that means I've done a lot of playing, just flat out tired. And some people have different feelings, hopefully no pain. But also you say, what is it? No pain, no gain. So
probably not true though. Or it shouldn't be true
in this sense.
In instrumental, Sarah Craner actually was telling me like her sister's also an ultra marathoner, because of course she is.
Yeah.
And she's like, I went and I saw my doctor and he asked how much pain I was in. It's like, like a 4 or 5 out of 10, an acceptable level of pain. And her doctor was like, an acceptable level of pain is no pain. I feel this is similar.
Yeah.
Should not be pain. Stress maybe, or getting used to it, but pain is like, oh no, don't cross that bridge.
Yeah. Generally, that's not a good thing.
So I'm just wondering, like, kind of a specific question about horn writing in brass quintet, because in orchestral we have like 1 and 3 is high, 2, 4 is low. In brass quintet writing, does it follow one or the other, or do you kind of have to play the
it's the whole instrument?
It's the whole instrument.
Yeah.
Does that mean your preparation is different? Do you kind of have to, or is that not really an issue?
For me, it's generally not an issue. I have, like I said, my strengths and weaknesses, but like on the job, even in first horn parts nowadays, I'm playing way below the staff, below the bass clef, and way above the treble clef staff. So it doesn't really matter. It's just a lot of like high, low, depending on the voicing of the brass quintet or what's happening in the piece at that point in time.
When you think, that's a great question. Do you think of the other members of the quintet in the same general roles that they hold in the orchestra? So you generally have 2 trumpets, French horn, trombone, and tuba. Do they generally function in the same way, or is there flexibility there?
The trumpets do a lot more in a brass quintet than they do in the orchestra.
Oh, we're going to have... Okay,
I should say they do a lot more melodic things. Like in the Haydn, Mozart, things like that we do, it's just a lot of hits with the timpani, bum, 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 little fanfares.
Okay.
But supportive.
It's more of a supportive role.
And then you get to, so with Shostakovich, where we are now, there are some melodic functions, but it does also still have that brass fanfare kind of feeling where...
I guess it's just, they're playing almost all the time, probably in a brass quintet.
All the time.
Right?
Yeah.
Compared to orchestrally, where it's going to move between parts, and then they'll have a solo, but then they're resting for, but they're
long
probably,
periods of time. Yeah. Or a whole movement.
Or,
yeah.
Yes.
Or 2.
Okay.
Or all but the last movement. It just depends.
Right. Yeah.
I did have a Mahler 8 trumpet tell me how much he was getting paid per note, and I was very upset about that. But Okay, so continue. So the trumpets have a lot more to do in a brass quintet than they generally do. So I imagine their endurance work, they have to step that up as they prepare for a concert.
Yeah. I would say so.
How about trombone and tuba?
I feel like trombone's probably about the same.
It's not a trick question. I promise.
That's one thing. I don't have experience in it, so I can't really give you a tried and true answer, if you will. Tuba, I feel like he's got to work a lot harder. Sorry, Craig. I don't know what to tell you, man. But I think everybody does have to work a little bit harder. I feel like for me, I'm working about the same.
Okay.
Because you often don't see me not playing in the orchestra.
Yeah.
So even in the early pieces, I'm always there. Whether you like it or not, I'm always there.
I'm there. Would you say, are you functioning then in that middle range still? So are you kind of like weaving throughout and facilitating, or do you get a lot of melodic moments in these pieces?
It's a mixture. There's a lot of melodic moments, but also there's a lot of texture and color changes because I have to be able to blend with the trumpets. And then I also have to be a trombone. And sometimes I play lower than the tuba, which is kind of crazy, but that's just how it is.
Who did that to you?
You mean who hurt me? I'm
yes.
kidding. There's a piece that I chose on purpose. It's called Five Maskers. It is by a Chinese-American composer. His name is Zhou Long. He's one of the professors at University of Missouri, Kansas City. My alma mater. Go Roos. I think it's like this. Go Roos. They do this thing now. That wasn't a thing whenever I was in school. I'm old. So, and I didn't realize he had a brass quintet. I knew he wrote a crazy solo horn piece for the ARD competition several years ago, and I've done that, which is amazing. And then I did some more research, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. That was part of my music from around the world that I was looking for, and it's just insane writing all over the place. It's not a very long piece, but Scott Quackenbush is playing piccolo trumpet, E flat, B flat, C. I think he might even have a D trumpet for some reason. So there's a lot of instruments going on there just to facilitate everything. And sometimes they switch trumpets just to make fingerings easier. I don't know. I got to transpose. I got to do all the things. I have one instrument, and
you can't just have a stunt horn, a second stunt horn next to you.
I could pick up a descant horn, which adds the high F side, which makes it easier. But I just prefer to do it all in one. It's easier for me.
I have so many questions now for trumpet. I can't wait to get Scott Quackenbush in here and
he'll tell you all about it.
Force him to answer for all these high crimes and misdemeanors. 5 trumpets.
I don't think there's any rotary trumpets on this program, so you're fine.
Yeah. Okay, so good. 5 trumpets.
I don't think any flugel either. Maybe there is, but I don't remember.
That is a shame, though. Flugelhorn's very pretty.
Yeah, but if you think about it in a brass quintet setting, there's some writing for it, but that's kind of my role in that particular setting.
That's okay. That was, for what was a joke, that's actually really interesting because the colors, so again, you have this homogeneous ensemble of a section, but the colors you have to achieve, I imagine, are extremely vast throughout the course of the program.
Yeah.
So are there things that you do with your playing to achieve something brassier or something more mellow so you can match more with trumpet versus, say, trombone? How do you...
Magic.
Great.
No, one of the things about brass quintets are a lot of them play loud really, really well. And the ones who play soft and loud are the ones that sound incredible. So to me, it's more of a dynamic spectrum. And a lot of things with the brass instruments, you can think of a broader sense. Think of the Great Gate of Kiev for Zorksky's pictures at an exhibition. There's a great Empire brass arrangement of that. And to me, it's loud playing, but it's not this. You're not punching at it like that. So there are some tricks of the trade that we do to make it sound still full and loud, but not, it's all about the articulation, about how you move your air, how much air, how little air, that kind of thing.
How much of it is natural now, and how much is it conscious choices that you have to make and mark in the music? Because it's a lot of music.
It is a lot of music.
You did this to yourself.
I did.
But I mean, how much are you able to internalize, and how much do you have to mark in so that when you turn the page, you're able to kind of like reset your perspective? Like, so this piece I need to accomplish this, this, and this.
Right. So I think all of these pieces that we're doing have at least one recording, but we're doing some things that are not done on the recordings. You know, it's not like the standards where you have 20 different recordings to listen to or more. Like in orchestral music, how many recordings of the Mahler symphonies or Strauss tone poems are there? There's a lot. Mm-hmm. But for these things, there's one. And I think it's up to us to kind of decide. And a lot of it's new music. None of us have ever seen it before. So we get to make that decision, which is cool. So there's a lot of marking things, just going through sections and doing it again, making sure that, you know, from point A to point B is great. And then you go from point B to point C, and then you go back to point A, make it to point C. Did that work? Yay, nay. Mm-hmm. You go from there.
I was wondering, in this kind of chamber setting, talking about rehearsals, is there a natural leader? Like when we talked to Susanna at the Brandenburg, they all kind of mentioned Susanna being the natural leader, or how does, you know, is it more democratic?
Yeah, I think we're all pretty equal. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in some groups there is one leader, but with us, I think we're all pretty laid back. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of default. If somebody says, hey, I would really like to do this here, let's try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll go to the next suggestion. You know, it's pretty easy.
Does it help that you're already colleagues, and so you have this foundational? When everyone's very polite in a group, I feel like that's a really hard group to play in, because you can tell people have needs and wants that they are not vocalizing in order not to rock the boat, but then that can make for a potentially disastrous performance. Yeah,
I think the important thing is we speak up when something like there is a physical limitation on an instrument, or someone's just really uncomfortable. They feel like they can't make the best music doing something one particular way or another, but we can accommodate. But there's nobody who says, oh, everything's great. We all have our own things on maybe how to phrase something or how to articulate something. And as we just play through things, we kind of get a feel of, oh, that articulation worked. Or sometimes we'll try something and we'll all laugh and be like, well, that sucked. And you just work on it. You figure it out. And unfortunately, we're not like one of like the American Brass Quintet. They are together 24/7 all the time. Mm-hmm. For us, it's, you know, we play here, but we don't have the chance to be a brass quintet all the time. So our roles are a little bit different.
Does that take time to settle in then as a quintet whenever you meet?
Yeah, a little bit. Not as much, but because I think this is the third year that all of us have been working together.
Okay.
Because I think Federico is the newest of us. Yeah.
Got it. How do you know, this was your program. There's a name on there I recognize, and I was curious if Adam Wolf wrote Hero specifically for this project.
No, he didn't. I think that was actually his first brass quintet that he wrote for his undergraduate at CalArts in California. Mm-hmm. And it was a piece, I knew he had a brass quintet, and I said, hey, send it to me. He said, cool. Here's the recording from like 13 years ago. And I said, awesome. We're going to change a few things. He said, yeah, go for it. And, you know, he knows me. He and I have a great relationship. And
you premiered his concerto a couple seasons ago.
The absolutely insane concerto, which I'm hoping to do again soon. But anyways, so things like that. He was like, yeah, great. This is the idea. If you have any questions, note questions, shoot me a text. And I did that a few times. Like, I sent him a picture and I was like, hey, what's this? And he'll be like, yeah, that's wrong. And then he'll like go back in the score and fix it. Because I mean, you know, people make it changes and things like that over time. Or we had a suggestion, like a tempo relationship. He said, awesome, make it work. Sounds good. So that's the nice thing about working with like a living composer. You have questions, you know, they have ideas about how their piece should go, which is totally fair. And you try to honor that the best that you can, but sometimes for your group, you got to make some slight adjustments.
Are there other composers on this program that you have a similar working relationship with currently, or that you've contacted about executing it this time?
I would say 3 of them know that we're doing their pieces, which is great. One of them, I sent her the program and I was like, hey, Kathy Lakuta is a Ukrainian-born composer living in Australia. And she's like the queen of horn writing. And I love it. She's got a ton of horn and piano. She's got a couple brass quintets, and that's her piece, Apex Predators, is what this concert is based off of. I heard it and I was like, yes, we've got to do that, because I've always wanted to do this piece. We've just never had the chance. And there's another one of her horn and piano pieces that I'm trying to do soon. It's hard. And so I just have to do it and, program it on an appropriate recital. And she's just rocking the composition world right now. It's like, I've got to get her on this program because, like I said, I've always wanted to. So, if I said, hey, Kathy, is this, how do you feel about this? She'd probably give her feedback and not, no problem. So it's nice to have that like that. But people like that, you have to have kind of a rapport, a special relationship with.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like if you had an author and like, I have an edit for page 39.
Yeah. And sometimes it does help to have just ask a question, because they might be able to clarify something in their own words that you can't exactly put on the page of a score on your own part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the piece you're most excited about on the program?
I'm very excited to put it together and perform it. I would say there's other pieces that I am just as equally excited about, but that was kind of the anchor for the whole program.
Love it. What piece so I posed this question to you, and I'm going to pose it to everyone we talk to, with the exception of Maria, because I thought of it after we talked to her. What piece are you most excited to play? And what piece are you most excited for the audience to hear?
That's tough. That's very tough.
It's kind of like your children, right? Like, can you have a favorite child? I
think they all have a different function. And I think every single piece is kind of a 50-50 split. There's half of it that you really, really enjoy playing. And then there's half of it that you absolutely, maybe you don't despise, but it's just difficult, or like it's tiring, but it's something that's going to be really effective for the audience. So I don't think of anything as like my favorite in that respect, but I think they hold equal importance.
If you were an audience member, which one though would you be like sitting up straighter for?
I think in terms of the thematic material that you're looking for, it's going to be Apex Predators.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think for me, I grew up as a little kid. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I love dinosaurs. I still have all my little plastic dinosaurs.
Your favorite dinosaur is?
I would probably have to say Brontosaurus.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because?
They're like the gentle giants. They've got the long necks. They've got all, we all grew up with Land Before Time, right? Did you ever see Land Before Time?
Why are you traumatizing me in the middle of the day, Brett? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to Serena? Look at Serena. Now she's remembering Land Before Time. This is the saddest movie.
All of the Land Before Time movies.
The rain, the crying in the rain.
Right, you got to get past that.
You got to get past that.
You got to
Okay,
get past
right.
that.
It has nothing to do with Jurassic Park and the most famous French horn solo ever being played
so
as
funny.
the Brontosaurus rises up from the swamp. It has nothing to do with that.
Now that I think about that, it was really cool. Last summer, I was lucky enough to be the acting principal for the San Francisco Symphony during their summer season, and we did an all John Williams program, and I think that was the first or second thing on the concert. I was like, whoa, that's really cool being able to do that with them. So that was, I guess maybe it all kind of relates subconsciously, but low key, I love dinosaurs.
I'm going to file that away for future use. I don't know how
put that in my 50-page thick file in the personnel office.
That's exactly right.
Just some one 8.5 by 11 paper Brett Loves Dinosaurs.
Just like slip it across to
Yeah.
just get this man a dinosaur, he'll do whatever.
Yes.
Oh man, some shirt ideas now. I was a brontosaurus before it was cool, something like that.
Oh yeah.
I love this information. Okay, so you, like the lacuna is what as an audience member you might look forward to the most.
Yeah, I think that will be the most thematic, and it's not necessarily what I call easy listening. For the specific easy listening genre, there's this Alec Wilder jazz suite that, I don't know if you guys know much of Alec Wilder's music. He was kind of this, like a free-flowing guy. I think he wrote most of his stuff, I want to say, between the 40s and I think he passed away in the 80s. So a lot of times he would write something on a napkin in a bar at 4 a.m. and then he would write it out for this weird ensemble of harpsichord, bass clarinet, and bagpipes, and it would sound incredible. There's an album on Spotify called Neurotic Goldfish. Check that out. It's really cool. It is cool.
All right. Neurotic Goldfish.
Neurotic Goldfish.
That is my pen name. Continue.
Yeah, but he also has some really serious. I think it's written out jazz. There are some parts that are improvisatory, like he's got a horn quartet with improvisatory drum set.
Okay.
Things like that. But most of the time it's written out. A lot of times it'll be like a triplet versus swung eighth notes or something like that.
He's very deliberate. Like he wants it exactly the way he intended it.
But it's very loose.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's this, I think that's special about his music. Mm-hmm. And he's got 3 horn sonatas, no concerto, a suite, like all this stuff. And I've had the pleasure of doing all of them. And so that's how I fell in love with this music. And he was one of those people where if you think, oh, that note doesn't sound right, and be like, cool, change it. So I think that's a special type of person to say, oh, maybe this is more effective this way or this way. And then, like every composer, that after the music is published, there's always like that one thing that, mm-hmm. Oh, they didn't catch this whenever they published it. You just change it. Everybody knows to change it. Mm-hmm. I have things in my Shostakovich 5 part that I'm like, nah, that's wrong.
Right. Well, that's so history lesson, right? So before the Iron Curtain came down, you could buy the Shostakovich and Prokofiev, all these big Russian scores, right, that had been published previously, and they refused to allow any purchases in the West after that. And so what's interesting is if you own a set, you can play it now that the copyright has passed. You can play it and keep using it, but if you have to, for some reason, get a new set, you have to rent it.
Yep.
And so it's this, like, we have this Shostakovich 5 part that I'm sure we've had for decades in our orchestra, and we will continue to use it for decades because it's ours as opposed to having to rent a completely new. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like I have the scores that I have are the nice big blue bound ones, but I think you have to order them from Japan or something like that. It's one of the countries where they can source it, things like that, and that's why I always double check. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not a staccato, that's a staccato, and that type of thing.
It's experience and practice.
Yep, practice makes perfect.
Most of the time.
It's debatable.
You're a French hornist, so.
Oh, nothing's ever perfect.
I would argue that. We depend on you pretty. You could set a watch to Brett Hodge, but
depends on the day.
Take the compliment, Brett. Brett, thank you so much for being here. I am very much looking forward to this program. And anything that our audience could do to prepare in advance, anything they should do.
I think, as all audiences should, keep an open mind. There might be something that you don't like. There might be something that you really like. And, my thing about concerts is that I want people to enjoy themselves. If I see someone doze off, that doesn't bother me. That means that they're relaxed. They're enjoying it. Mm-hmm. If I see someone wearing a suit and tie, great. If I see someone wearing t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flop, great. It's we're here to serve the people. They're not there to serve us. We're here to serve them. So I think just whoever, if you're curious about it, come to it. If you like it, great. Ask the questions. We're always there afterwards, in the pre-concert talks. Come hear it. If you're really that curious, listen to that. Just keep an open mind to everything.
Love it.
That's all we can do.
Love it. Come as you are.
That's right.
Thank you, Brett. This is
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah.
No time for ASMR.
Close.